Hey, so I'm going to talk about my app that I'm doing for project and portfolio. Whatever number we're on now, I'm not sure. But here's what we started with at the end of the week, or at the beginning of the week. Um, so this is the original gigantic one long CPP file, well, header file actually, that just contains the app and contains all the functions for the app, and everything has access to everything else. Um, and then the main function is literally just running the app. That's it. This works. I will show you. Compiles quite fast. I get 7,000, 8,000 FPS when I'm not recording. Um, Console is there. There it is. Looking for two different validation layers. The actual validation layer and then the monitor layer, which gives me the FPS. The validation layer just prints out a bunch of debug information if something goes wrong in Vulkan. So if I go into like release mode, that won't happen. We won't have the validation layers. See, we just have the monitor and that's it. So there is no debug in this, which is why it runs at 10,000 FPS instead of 7,000. It does make quite a big of a difference. So we started with this. We ended up with this. There's a lot more files going on, but it's the same code. So here is what's left of the actual CloneCraft app. CloneCraft app.h. This is the header. I moved a bunch of code into the CPP file. This is the instantiation of all of the members over here. All of these. The only way I could do that was to do them in this fashion. I forget what this is called, but it's like C++ 17. I want to call it like auto instantiation, but that's not what it is. It's like I forget what it's called, but it just calls the constructor of whatever member variable you have, and then you can pass in other members to those to use those for instantiation, right? So basically, like over here in the swap chain manager, I'm passing in the device manager, the surface manager, window manager, text manager, etc., 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 all the way down, so that when I go into the swap chain manager, you can see it has all these pointers to all of the other devices, so that it can interface with all of the, whatever it needs to interface with, and it needs to do that for functions like creating the swap chain, right? So this interfaces with a lot of different things. Actually, here, cleaning up and recreating the swap chain. So see, we need to interface with the device manager. We need to interface with the texture manager, the memory manager, buffer manager, the actual render manager to get like command pools and like the render paths and pipeline manager. Like we need all these different managers to try and I'm sorry. It's been a long week. Try and interface with anything that's created inside this object. So there's only one CloneCraft app object that actually gets declared, and that's over here in main. And main just runs the app. This looks the same as the old one. See? Same function. I just added a little memory leak detection thing up top. This is just for memory leak detection. That's it. This still works. I'll show you. There's debug mode. 7,000, 8,000 FPS when I'm not recording. And we'll show you release. It's already compiled. That's kind of nice. Same thing. 10,000 FPS because we're not using validation layers. We're only using the monitor layer from LunarG. So that's that. Now, I did get all this done, clearly. But I've been thinking, because I've been reading a lot more about like Vulkan when I have time, and I think maybe this wasn't the best decision, because all of these managers are literally just there. Like all their functions and things like that are just there for initialization and initializing Vulkan, right? So like if I go back to the original and I have the init Vulkan function right here, all of this is just setup. This is all just setup and like front-loaded BS so that you can get to where you can draw frames. That's it. This is all that's happening right here. Just this while loop. This loop is all that's happening while the app is running. That's it. It's pulling for window events to check if the window should close, and then it's drawing a frame. That's it. The only time we ever are not drawing a frame is if the window is resized or if it's closed. If the window is resized or like minimized or something, then we jump back up into recreating the swap chain because it has to be resized. And that's it. So having all of these bajillion managers clogging up what I'm looking at and like all these weird like pointers to everything, like I think I unintentionally made it more confusing even though it's more organized now. Right? Because like I have this memory manager, right, which holds the actual memory locations for like the vertex buffer, the index buffer, uniform buffers, any sort of memory object that we have. And then there's getters for them. There's not setters, but there's getters. And it doesn't make sense to declare, like, if we go to the texture manager, it doesn't make sense to have the depth image and the texture image declared here and then used in the CPP file, right? But then have their memory locations elsewhere. Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to have to do this right here. If I want to get the memory location or like where this, so when you call create image, it takes a whole butt ton of parameters, right? It's really not that many parameters, but I mean, well, I guess it is. So it takes the width, the height, and then a bunch of bits. This is like the format, so like sRGB. These are all like different bit flags. The texture image, right? And then the memory address where this is, so this is like device memory, right? So like the actual like physical, like your graphics card in your computer. That's what this is. This is the memory on the device, and this is like memory on your computer, right? That's the difference. It doesn't make sense to have a texture image right here and then have its memory in a different object. Like, I didn't think about that when I was designing this, so maybe this isn't the best system. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, it works, but there's a lot of BS dealing with all these pointers. Whereas in the original, it was just, hey, use all of these things that we have available to every function because it's all contained in one app. So basically, all of these variables are global, you know, in quotes, kind of global, but they're not really because they're contained within the app. But everything's in one file, so they're technically global, right? And so, like right here, create graphics pipeline. In the new version, Create Graphics Pipeline is part of the pipeline manager, right? See? But it has to access these pointers, and then I had to have like a global helpers to read the file so I can read file from like other managers, right? So I put it in this global helpers namespace kind of thing, class. I have to access that, and then I have to access the pointer to create the shader module, and then put it in here, like from the code, and then put it in here. Which is weird, right? I don't know, it just, because I also have a shader manager, so like, should this go in the shader manager because it's a shader module? But then I have to access it with a pointer. It's just, there's no encapsulation, right? And that's bothering me because I feel like it's going to cause problems when I go to like try and implement a lot of things. Because now instead of my code being all in one place in one massive ass file, it's in many different places, and I have to hunt through it. But I also had to hunt through it in here, just in a different way. I don't know, I guess we'll see. Like, when I start trying to implement other things, and I hit like a roadblock in this, I'll come over here and be like, okay, is it easier to implement in this area? You know, maybe I can just declare an object, add it to, not declare, but like create a new class or something like a camera or a player class, add it into here, into the app or something, and then, you know, we can interface back and forth so that the application, like the actual behind the scenes of like initializing the Vulkan instance and creating a window is all hidden within this app, and then actual gameplay things are what's visible over here rather than all of this nonsense, you know? But I don't know how effective this really was. at doing all this. But it took a while. It took all week. I just finished yesterday, and so yeah. I'm gonna try and focus more on actual gameplay features, right? So figuring out a game out of this. So number one is like handling input, mouse input, keyboard input, so I can move around in the scene. And then I wanna get when we draw frames, the vertex data that we're using is like it's from one file, so it's like I can't be like, hey, this is a cube, because the vertices for what we're drawing are like baked into the class, right? So I need to take that out so that I can just feed the draw frame function vertices in a more clean fashion. So I just be like, hey, draw this, right? Or draw this vector that contains drawable objects. That way I can build like a chunk in the world of cubes, like Minecraft, right? I can build like a chunk and just have like a vector of chunks, and each chunk has a gigantic array of blocks in it, and then I can just be like, hey, render everything that's in this vector in the world vector, right? The world vector is just a list of chunks around the player. So then I can, I can start doing that. But for that to happen, I need to figure out a way to feed the pipeline information in a better way. So that's what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully I answered your questions. Well, not your questions, but like answered the little prompts. Code review, app demonstration, self-reflection, all that kind of fun stuff. There's not a whole lot on the Trello board, just because I don't find it productive for me to work that way. I find it's another thing for me to think about, and I don't like thinking about a lot of things. I like focusing down on one thing, so I'll add. What you're going to see is I'm just going to be adding like one or two things at a time. Like, okay, refactor code for maintainability. What does that mean? It doesn't matter what it means to anybody else, because nobody else was working on the project for me. That's another thing. It's just me, so I know what it means, and I'll know what it means in the future. Like, it's okay for me to just be like, okay, refactor the code. And then once that's done, take a week and then move the card over. So it's not going to be super descriptive on the Trello board, but I will be using it. It's just not going to be a dictionary of how the app is going to work. And then the GitHub, I just update that whenever something I get accomplished over here. So yeah, that is it, I think. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.